Good evening and welcome to ScaldNet 7. My name is Patryk Witkowski and I am joined today by former SNP MSP and Social Care Minister Maureen Watt. It's nice to have you.
Yes, good evening, Patrick. Long time no see.
Yeah, it's been a while. For our first story, we've got our Ukraine update, day 1013 of a conflict. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz arrived in Kiev this morning for a surprise visit. Der Spiegel reported Scholz is saying he wanted to express his solidarity and promised Germany would remain Ukraine's strongest supporter in Europe. In a meeting with President Zelensky, Scholz confirmed the further €650 million in military equipment will be delivered in December. At least 2 people were killed and others injured in a Russian attack in Ternopil in western Ukraine. The Ukrainian Air Force said today that Russia launched 110 drone attacks the previous night. The Air Force shot down 52, while 50 were, quote, lost, likely due to electronic warfare, it said. 1 remained in Ukrainian airspace and 6 headed towards Belarus and Russia. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said on Sunday there was still time to convince skeptics that Ukraine should be invited to join NATO. An invitation to Ukraine to join NATO is a necessary thing for our survival, Zelensky said. On Friday, Zelensky said that NATO protection for the free part of Ukraine could end the hot war, leaving Kiev to regain the Russian-occupied areas through diplomatic means. Zelensky said that his country needed security guarantees from NATO and more weapons to defend itself from any talks with Russia. Before any talks with Russia, sorry. Zelensky made the comments after meeting the EU's new top diplomat Kaja Kallas and the EU Council Chief Antonio Costa, who were visiting Kiev as a show of support on her first day in office. Kallas said before the meeting that for Kiev, the strongest security guarantee is NATO membership. We need to definitely discuss this. If Ukraine decides to withdraw the line somewhere, then how can we secure peace so that Putin doesn't go any further? Kallas went to Ukraine on her first day as EU's chief diplomat. My message is clear, she said. The European Union wants Ukraine to win the war. Kallas had previously stood down as Estonia's prime minister to take the job. At least 3 people were killed in a Russian drone attack on the southern Ukrainian city of Kherson, the regional governor said on Sunday. Germany's foreign minister, Annalena Baerbock, has accused China of providing Russia with weapons for its war against Ukraine and threatening peace in Europe and the Indo-Pacific. Baerbock will travel to China next week to meet with her counterpart Wang Yi and discuss issues including the war in Ukraine. The US is not considering restoring the Ukraine with nuclear weapon capability it gave up after the Soviet Union collapsed, the White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said on Sunday. The world's 100 biggest defense equipment makers increased their arms sales by 4.2% in 2023 to $632 billion. Fueled by wars and regional tensions, the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, SIPRI, said today. U.S. groups on SIPRI's list grew sales by 2.5% in total compared with a year before to $317 billion. Market leaders Lockheed Martin and RTX, however, saw slightly lower arms sales. European companies on the list, excluding Russian, had roughly unchanged combined sales in 2023 at $133 billion. But order intake surged and some groups saw a surge in demand linked to the war in Ukraine. Maureen, shifting over to you, I wanted to, obviously, we've got the discussion again of NATO membership. Do you think that this would be, would this be something that Putin would be able to accept if he got to keep the East Donbass or some level of the contested territories and for the rest of Ukraine join NATO? And also, When it comes to actual changes and involvement in the conflict, do you think much will happen before Trump's presidency? Biden got some criticism for making changes in the missile rules because he's so close to the end of his term. Do you expect more changes to happen, or will people be waiting for Trump to come in and then kind of uh, theme the global conversation around that?
So, to answer your last question first, Patrick, I think Biden's doing all he can in the last few months of his presidency to support Ukraine and Zelensky, and get him as many arms that have been promised to him before Trump comes into power, because Trump has made such a big thing about wanting to end the war on day one, which of course is rubbish. But he will obviously try somehow to fulfill that promise, and that I think will be doing deals with Putin. Do I think Putin will be okay with Ukraine joining NATO if he gets to keep some territory? Absolutely not. I mean, Putin regards NATO as his main enemy, I would say. Obviously, the expansion of NATO is clearly not in his interests, and we know many of the countries bordering Russia, for example, like Georgia, want to move towards the west rather than the east. So I don't think joining NATO will be part of the deal, but you do get the feeling that this conflict might just be moving towards the end game, and what that will look like, so that both sides, I mean, negotiation has got to result in both sides saving some face if it's going to work, is really important, or else there's not going to be any negotiation. But I cannot help, I mean, putting myself in that situation, how utterly dejected many Ukrainians must be getting with power outages and winter coming. But the resilience that that nation shows, by gum, has been absolutely amazing.
Thank you very much, Maureen. Moving on to our Middle East update, where at least 44,466 Palestinians have been killed and 105,358 wounded in Gaza since the 7th of October 2023, according to a statement from the Gaza Health Authority. Palestinian news agency Wafa reports that since last night, Israeli security forces have arrested 12 people in the Israeli-occupied West Bank. It said the arrests were made across a number of locations, including the in the Hebron, Ramallah, and Tubas regions. More than 3,960 people have been killed and more than 16,500 injured in Israeli attacks in Lebanon, and over 1 million displaced since October 2023. Israeli military has issued an order prohibiting the inhabitants of dozens of villages in the south of Lebanon from returning to their homes. At least 2 people were killed on Monday in Israeli strikes on southern Lebanon, Lebanese authorities said, as the speakers of Lebanon's parliament accused Israel of 54 violations of a recent ceasefire deal. Israel has denied this. The Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar reported to have told French counterpart Jean-Noel Barrot on the phone Monday that Israel is enforcing the ceasefire terms in the face of Hezbollah's violations that require an immediate response in real time. Quote, claiming that Hezbollah operatives have been seen armed south of the Litani River. Iranian-backed Iraqi militias crossed into eastern Syria overnight in an attempt to shore up struggling forces loyal to Damascus, battling an insurgency that has swept much of the country's northwest as Islamist militants seized control of Aleppo. The Iraqi militants, which include fighters from Kataib Hezbollah and Fatimiyon groups, arrived near the eastern Syrian town of Abu Kamal overnight to join units already deployed within Syria in support of Damascus, according to the Associated Press. A blimp emblazoned with a message, "Save them now," is in reference to hostages held by Hamas in Gaza, has been flown over the Israeli Prime Minister's office in Jerusalem. Relatives and loved ones of those being held captive have repeatedly criticized Benjamin Netanyahu and his government for failing to secure a deal for their release. Israel's military announced it believes New York born US Israeli hostage, Captain Omer Nutra, an IDF soldier abducted in Gaza on 7th October 2023, is dead and was killed in the morning of the attack. His body remains held in Gaza. Israeli media reports that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will give testimony in his corruption trial not in Jerusalem as originally planned, but in a fortified bunker in Tel Aviv for security reasons. Israel's far-right Interior Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir has said in a radio interview that he would move to a new Jewish settlement if one was built inside Gaza, saying, "Occupying territory, encouraging emigration, those are solutions that can allow for a different reality in Gaza." Quote. The president of the International Criminal Court, which has issued arrest warrants for senior Israeli and Hamas figures over suspected war crimes, said threats facing the institution, including possible US sanctions and Russian warrants for staff members, jeopardize its very existence. Quote. Maureen, passing over to you. Firstly, what do you make of the of Israel's Interior Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir's quote there, saying that incentivizing or encouraging emigration and capture of Gaza territory is the solution to the conflict?
Yes, well, this is not new because a few months ago, I remember seeing a report of Jewish people looking through telescopes at land in Gaza where they would like to occupy and settle. And this is clearly the plan of Netanyahu and his government to immediately occupy, I was going to say destroyed parts of Gaza, but Gaza is almost completely obliterated, in order to physically, although perhaps not militarily, push Palestinians right out of Gaza. So this is clearly something that is more active now than it may have been earlier on in the war, and something, as I say, that's clearly part of policy, which is absolutely abhorrent. And that's where international mediators must have a role in trying to curb Netanyahu from, as I say, completely obliterating Gaza and Palestinian occupation in that part of the Middle East just completely off the map, which is clearly, more clearly than ever, Netanyahu's goal. In terms of the wider Middle East, golly, it's difficult keeping up with things that are happening there at the moment, especially this new conflict with insurgency in Syria against the Assad regime. And this is important because clearly Assad is a friend of Russia, Iran and China, I think. I'm not saying anything out of line there. So insurgency there, whoever the insurgents might be, is another reason to be wary of the whole of the Middle East becoming a complete powder keg.
Yeah, and I suppose you mentioned there sort of Netanyahu's plan or Netanyahu's attempts to occupy or destroy parts of Gaza. How pivotal of a figure do you think Netanyahu is for these plans? If Netanyahu was to, for example, in his current corruption and bribery case, to end up being prosecuted and lose his position, do you think he'd just be replaced by another equally I, another person equally adamant on these same plans that you see, or do you think it would actually throw a spanner in the sort of progression and the progression of this conflict? I suppose.
I'm not so much of a Middle East watcher and expert to know the answer to that, but my feeling would be that it's difficult to see Netanyahu being prosecuted internally at this moment.
Mm.
I doubt that there's enough opposition, strong opposition to him. Clearly, there are Israelis who want to see him gone, but whether that is the majority, I doubt. And so perhaps, I don't know, this trial might be some sort of showcase to show that Netanyahu is strong and working for all Israelis. But it's difficult, I would have thought, to predict the outcome. And I haven't read any articles one way or another on this, I have to confess.
Thank you, Maureen. For our next story, we shift to the UK, where business confidence plummets since Rachel Reeves's budget. Growth expectations among UK companies have taken a decisive turn for the worse in a fresh blow to Rachel Reeves amid warnings that business confidence has plummeted since the budget. For the first time this year, expectations for growth have turned negative, according to the Confederation of British Industries' latest growth indicator, which shows that a majority of companies expect activity to decline in the 3 months to February. Business volumes in the services sector are anticipated to decline, including in consumer services, with more firms in the business and professional services sector expecting a drop in activity as opposed to a rise in the next 3 months. The CBI's latest growth indicator showed that growth expectations have turned negative for the first time this year after the Labour government's budget laid down £40 billion worth of tax rises, including a £25 billion raid on business national insurance contributions. CBI Interim Deputy Chief Economist Alpesh Palea said the expectations for growth have taken a decisive turn for the worse, adding that the Chancellor's announcements have left businesses with even more tough decisions to make. Mr. Palea specifically warned that employer national insurance contributions could be to blame for companies cutting jobs with hiring and cutting the quote hiring intentions at their weakest since the tail end of the COVID-19 pandemic. SNP economy spokesperson Dave Dugan MP has said 2025 is set to be another year of gloom in broken Brexit Britain. Mr. Dugan went on to say that the Labour government has destroyed business confidence and taken a wrecking ball to jobs and wages. We warned there was really real danger national insurance rises could lead to squeezed pay for thousands of Scottish workers, fewer jobs, and even redundancies. Now, the CBI has issued this stark outlook. The Labour government must listen. While the Labour Party promised change at the general election, instead they robbed pensioners of their winter fuel payment, leaving the SNP Scottish Government to clear up the mess and introduce a new, unique Scottish payment, while Rachel Reeves poured fuel on the cost of living crisis fire with crushing tax rises and soaring food costs. Scottish people and businesses are suffering this winter because of Sir Keir Starmer's government and uh, from Labour MPs from Scotland cheered him on every step of the way. Uh, Duggan went on to say that 2025 looks to be another year of gloom in broken Brexit Britain, with Sir Keir Starmer, backed by Labour MPs from Scotland, set to herald in another year of inflation and low growth. It's the latest chapter in the decrepit tale of isolated Britain, and Scots deserve better. Maureen, what do you make of that quote from Duggan? And also, what do you make of Rachel Reeves's defense when brought up, specifically talking about national insurance contributions being raised, that nobody else had a solution for raising money like they did, that people are just complaining about the Labour solution without offering an alternative?
Well, I suppose part of that is true, but what is clear now that Labour came into government or stood on a platform really not knowing, never mind the black hole and all that, really not knowing enough about economics to work out how to get Britain working again and growth on the cards. And clearly, as the CBI pointed out at their conference last week to Rachel Reeves, that hikes in national insurance are not going to lead to any growth. And even before it's implemented, we are seeing no kind of bounce, if you like, for the Labour government from industry, because, you know, industry was asking for stability and a change of direction and all that, but even in the few months that they've been in power, that's not materialised in the business sector. There are contrasts actually to that in the Scottish sector. We have seen higher growth in Scotland compared to the rest of the UK, and certainly investment in small startup companies. So there are signs that Scotland can make a difference here in Scotland, but that will probably be wiped out by the hike in national insurance, because I suspect that post-Christmas and post-January sale time, we will see businesses laying people off and certainly not hiring. And that, of course, it means a downward spiral into more decline. And, you know, well, you know, the end of austerity that Labour promised is certainly not on anybody's horizon. And whether we'll just see Labour bounce along for 5 years, making absolutely no dent in the misery of millions of people's lives, that looks to be the picture at the moment anyway. And no, no Christmas cheer for anyone.
Now, obviously, you said that Labour doesn't seem to have the sort of maybe economic knowledge or the economic plan to be able to lead the growth that they promised. The Conservatives arguably weren't able to do this either. Do you think that there are parties that are offering something different, that are maybe offering plans or ideas that haven't been implemented by either Labour or Conservatives that could potentially work?
Well, I would have to say that, you know, countries like France are not doing particularly well, or Germany either at the moment. So whether this is a worldwide phenomenon or just something that European countries are going through, it's difficult to say. But I mean, here in Scotland, we have a chance with an independent Scotland to be motoring ahead. You know, you don't want unfettered growth, because that just leads to inflation and all the problems that come with that. But Scotland on its own has a huge amount of natural resources, an abundance of energy, a well-educated population and workforce, and, you know, first-class universities, who, along with some businesses, do fantastic innovation. You know, exports that are wanted worldwide in our food and drink, particularly, but also in terms of IT and life sciences. So, we could see a future that is very different if people just have confidence in their own country to run its own affairs.
Thank you, Maureen. Sir Keir Starmer's new plan for change. In 2023, Sir Keir announced 5 missions, which he said were not just conventional performance targets, but part of an attempt to make government more strategic and focused on long term. The 5 headline missions were: 1. Kickstart economic growth; 2. Make Britain a clean energy superpower; 3. Take back our streets; 4. Break down barriers to opportunity; 5. Build an NHS fit for the future. And the 5 headline missions all included submissions, so arguably there were around 26 targets or pledges in the document. As the election approached, Sir Keir Starmer sought to simplify his offer by announcing 6 first steps for change. 1. Deliver economic stability; 2. Cut NHS waiting times; 3. Launch a new border security command; 4. Set up Great British Energy; 5. Crack down on antisocial behaviour; and 6. Recruit 6,500 new teachers. Labour say that the new milestones will build on what the mission set out. But in announcing their new priorities, it is hard to avoid the conclusions that the old priorities are being downgraded. And so it is not surprising that opponents and commentators are calling it a relaunch. In a speech on Thursday, Sir Keir Starmer is going to announce a plan for change that will include measurable milestones. In the advance briefing, Starmer said it would be the most ambitious yet honest program for government in a generation. By hyping his speech so far in advance, rumors surround the Prime Minister's new pledges. What the Prime Minister's new pledges will be. Speaking yesterday, Cabinet Office Minister Pat McFadden revealed that one of the new milestones will be to increase the number of children who are deemed educationally and socially ready when they start primary school from the current 60% to 75%. It is also being reported that another milestone will be for the NHS in England to reach its target of getting the number of patients who get their operation within 18 weeks up to at least 92%. The goals and purpose of GB Energy remain obscure, with its CEO being based in Manchester and not in Aberdeen, where it is proposed to have its head office. It was announced today that Sir Keir Starmer has appointed Chris Wormald, a career civil servant who heads the health department, to become the new cabinet secretary. Wormald has spent 8 years as permanent secretary of the Department of Health and Social Care and will take over from Simon Case on 16th December as the most senior official in the country. Maureen, while taking a look at these 6 first steps that were promised during the campaign: kickstarting economic growth, making Britain a clean energy superpower, taking back the streets, GB Energy, cracking antisocial behavior, and recruiting 6,500 teachers. Do you think any of these plans are in particular jeopardy for Labour? Which one of these are going to face their biggest change, would you think?
Well, if I've taken them down right, if we go through them all, kickstart our economy, well, we've just been talking about how that doesn't look likely to happen anytime soon because of what the CBI and others have been saying. Clean energy seems to me to have taken a hit as well, with one car company laying workers off because the take up of electric vehicles has not been as fast as was predicted. Take back our streets and cut anti-social behaviour. That's in every party's manifesto, isn't it? If it's a problem at the moment. And that is very difficult to do unless you start at grassroots level and take help children get on the right, and youngsters get on the right path by, keeping leisure centres open, by providing, as we do in many parts of Scotland, street soccer, where students from universities and colleges go out of an evening and give training in football and other sports. These kind of grassroots things need to be in place so that, as I say, youngsters are given alternatives to crime and vandalism and disruption in our streets. But there's wider things than that. There's making sure that all parts of society feel included and that there's hope among them. And I don't think that's happening in the rest of the UK at the moment. I mean, we're beginning to see the wheels come off GB Energy, are we not? With looking like Aberdeen is just going to be a nameplate for GB Energy rather than where the work is actually carried out. So, and 6,500 teachers. I wonder where they're going to get those because we know how long it takes to train teachers and have to have the places for them. So, laudable aims, but they have to be followed up with real action. And we haven't seen that of yet. We'll see whether he gives Sir Keir Starmer gives us the actions that he's going to take to make these things happen.
Thank you very much, Maureen. Scottish Power offers to recruit workers facing redundancy from INEOS at Grangemouth. Workers facing redundancy at INEOS's Grangemouth refinery and construction giant ISG have been offered a job lifeline by Scottish Power. The Glasgow-headquartered energy company is looking to recruit 1,000 people next year and urge staff whose jobs are under threat to INEOS and ISG to get in touch to secure a new role. Scottish Power says there is a clear skills crossover and it can help find new careers in its electricity networks business as it ramps up investment. With electricity demand set to double, the UK is undergoing the biggest ever rewiring of its grid. In September, Scottish Power announced it was doubling its UK investment to £24 billion, with £11 billion to be spent in Scotland, as grid owners upgrade and build new power lines to cope with demand and increase capacity. The company confirmed £5.4 billion worth of supply chain contracts with UK and Irish businesses last week, but it says it also needs to recruit more of its own workforce to get the vital project built. Sarah McNulty, the People and Organizations Director, said the massive investment in electricity networks is not just good for modernizing critical Scottish infrastructure, but for jobs too. This is one of the largest ever recruitment programs and one of the largest in Scotland. Workers at both INEOS and ISG will have the sought after skills we are looking for, and we can have jobs to match. We're also more than happy to look at how we help people make them move forward into power networks from oil and gas if they're looking for a career switch. To so anyone interested should get in touch. Maureen Watt, how important to you, or how bothered are you by the concept of Scotland's only oil refinery being closed down? Obviously, there were protests, and the Grangemouth community seems to be pretty affected by this. Luckily, some people will be able to retain a job in that field. But what do you make of the situation as a whole?
Well, I can't understand why there isn't more of an outrage in the media, mainstream media, about the only refinery in Scotland, the energy rich, the oil and gas rich part of the UK having its refinery closed. And, for years now, there has been tankers bringing energy, liquefied gas into Grangemouth. I'm not sure if that's going to continue, but nevertheless, all the facilities are there. albeit they might need upgrading. And why hasn't Ineos been upgrading Grangemouth all these years and making huge profits? Their owner is one of the richest men in the world, and I just cannot understand why, as I say, more is not being made of this. It's good that Scottish Power is offering the workers who are being made redundant jobs, and that's a positive example of the energy transition to electricity, where the grid is needing upgraded. It's been needing upgraded for decades and decades, and now that England is needing power from Scotland in terms of electricity, obviously the grid is being upgraded. But that means that more and more communities are going to see larger pylons going through their area. And what is Scotland getting from it? Absolutely zero. It's time that Scotland had its independence and was selling this energy to England and the rest of Europe, and making some money from it, not, as is happening at the moment, getting nothing for it.
Thank you, Maureen. Shifting to the US, President Biden pardons his son. President Biden has issued a full and unconditional pardon to his son, Hunter Biden, covering convictions on federal gun and tax charges. The US president said in a statement released by the White House on Sunday. The decision marks a reversal for the president, who has repeatedly said he would not use his executive authority to pardon his son or commute his sentence. Hunter Biden was scheduled to be sentenced for his convictions on federal gun charges on 12 December. He was scheduled to be sentenced in the tax case 4 days later. In the statement, Joe Biden said that he had long maintained that he would not interfere with the Justice Department's decision-making, and I kept my word even as I have watched my son being selectively and unfairly prosecuted. But he argued that it is clear that Hunter was treated differently, adding that this only came after several of my political opponents in Congress instigated them to attack me and oppose my election. Now, Maureen, with a sort of short response on this, because we also have other UK stories to get to, what do you make of this decision by Hunter Biden, and how does it affect his legacy?
Well, I mean, he's got nothing to lose now. But the hypocrisy of Trump and his supporters on this is unbelievable, given that we're likely to see Trump giving pardons to the people who stormed the White House. Enough said.
Thank you very much, Maureen. Shifting back to the UK, like I said we would, we've got Fianna Fáil and we're starting with Ireland first, actually. Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael expected to retain power in Irish general election. The two main centre-right parties in Ireland are expected to start talks on returning to government as the general election put the incumbents within touching distance of forming the 34th Dáil? Whoops. All but 12 of TD's seats were filled when counting resumed at 9 a.m. today, but the results so far and the tallies for remaining seats suggest that Fianna Fáil, led by Michael Martin, and Fine Gael, led by Simon Harris, will together get 86 seats, just too short of the 88 needed for a majority. With Fianna Fáil expected to be the larger party on 48 seats to Fine Gael's 38 or so, Harris's position as Taoiseach could come under pressure. If there is reprise of the Fianna Fáil Fine Gael governing partnership of the last mandate, one question is whether the parties continue their policy of rotating Taoiseachs. The previous coalition struck a historic agreement to make Michael Martin first, and then Leo Varadkar as the leader of the Fine Gael, followed by Simon Harris, serving as Taoiseach. Sorry. Fianna Fáil deputy leader Jack Chambers said talks could last for weeks, but nothing like almost 5 months that it took for their coalition with Fine Gael to be agreed last time. A major decision will be whether the two parties team up like-minded independent candidates to form the next government, or whether they rely on the support of either the smaller left-leaning Social Democrat or Labour parties. Agreeing a programme for government after a campaign that involved big spending promises could involve some horse trading, but all parties are agreed that they must deliver on housing and homelessness. The number one priority of the electorate, according to the Friday night's exit poll. The government's previous partners, the partner of the Greens, were virtually annihilated in the election, with its leader, Roderick O'Gorman, the sole remaining TD of 12. After scraping in on the 13th count in Dublin West constituency on Sunday night, he said he did not think he had a mandate to return to government. Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael have already ruled out working with Sinn Féin, which is expected to finish with a similar number of seats as Fine Gael, but not enough to lead a stable left-leaning government. Labour and Social Democrats, who are expecting to finish up doubling their numbers of seats with about 11 each, have both said they would talk to Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, but would first take stock of a position of parties on the left. Maureen, what do you make of this sort of slightly complicated election situation going on in Ireland?
It is a complicated election system, but a fair election system, although the counting, as you say, Patryk, does take some time. It is disappointing that it's going to be more of the same for the people of Ireland. The Sinn Féin were showing very strongly at the beginning of the counting, but it's clear that they're not going to get anybody to go into government with them, even although they may be the largest party. And this is in a backdrop of, the Irish economy having a great surplus, a 25 billion surplus, note that, compared to the black hole in the UK economy. But I think the people of Ireland will be looking to see the government making use of that, and as you say, investing in housing and other services to make sure that the people of Ireland feel the benefit of that money.
Thank you very much, Maureen. Scotland is to host the 42nd British-Irish Council. The Scottish Government will host the 42nd summit meeting of the British-Irish Council in Edinburgh on the 5th and 6th December, where First Minister John Swinney has confirmed. The British-Irish Council was formally established following the Good Friday Agreement. It brings together leaders from the Northern Ireland Executive, the Government of Ireland, and the UK Government, the Scottish Government, the Welsh Government, and the Isle of Man Government, the Government of Jersey, the Government of and the Government of Guernsey. The meeting in Edinburgh marks the 25th anniversary of the first BIC, which was held in London in 1999. With a focus on financing a just transition, the First Minister said this summit provides a forum for leaders to work collaboratively on tackling climate change and delivering real progress towards action that will help protect the planet. First Minister John Swinney said, "I am pleased to confirm Scotland will host the 42nd summit meeting of the British-Irish Council in Edinburgh." a meeting which marks the 25th anniversary of the first summit, which took place in December 1999 following the Good Friday Agreement. Since the first meeting, politics across our nations and the issues, very sorry, that we have each faced have changed significantly. However, the principles underpinning the British-Irish Council remain as important now as they did 25 years ago. The First Minister goes on to say that in this anniversary year, I hope for our meeting in Edinburgh will encourage and enhance a shared desire to work collaboratively on the big issues facing people. One of the biggest issues facing us is, of course, climate change, and the summit's theme of financing a just transition is a critical example of how governments must work together in recognition of the challenges we have to overcome while seizing shared opportunities for the future. A short comment, if you could, Maureen, on this story.
Yeah, well, I think the British Irish Council can be very important. I remember taking part part on what on part in one of these when the topic was drugs, uh, the issue of drugs, and unfortunately, it wasn't really that productive because the UK government sees drugs as a justice issue, not a health issue, and all the other nations saw it as a health issue. I think this is time for a reset on the British Irish Council. And if Labour see all of the nations of the UK making up the UK being equal partners, then they have to change the way this works. And it'll be interesting to see if that happens when the meeting takes place.
Thank you, Maureen. Shifting to Scotland, the Scottish Household Survey is the Trust in Public Institutions 2023 report, published today, contains the key findings of the questions asked in the social survey on trust in public institutions in Scotland. The survey asked to what extent people trusted 7 different public institutions: the Scottish Government, local government, the civil service, the education system, the health system, the police, and the justice systems. Sorry. The institutions that adults in Scotland were most likely to express trust in were the health system, 78%, and the police, 73%. Compared to 2022's findings, this represents a very slight decline in trust in the health system, with 79% in 2022, and a slightly larger decline of the trust in the police, which was at 78% in 2022. Of the 7 institutions, people were most likely to express distrust in the Scottish Government, 45% trusting, and the local government with 35%. Compared to 2022 figures, this represents a slight increase in distrust of local government, 32% in 2022, and a larger increase in distrust in Scottish Government, 38% in 2022. The level of satisfaction with local health services has increased, with a proportion of people satisfied rising in a year from 64% to 67%, and nearly 9 in 10, 87%, reported being treated with dignity and respect. Results in Scotland are in contrast to a report from the Demos, a cross-party think tank, which shows that complaints about public services in England have soared by more than a third since 2016, with substantial jumps in relation to benefits, prisons, the NHS, and higher education. Demos found that between 2015 and 2016 and 2023 and 2024, complaints across key public services increased steadily by ever more than 100,000, from 309,758 to 425,624, aside from a sharp drop during the pandemic. It said complaints about the departments for work and pensions doubled over this period, and those above higher education rose by 70%. It found NHS written complaints rose during the period by 20% to 241,922, doubled at the DWP to 120,509, and were up 94% in prisons and probation prisons and probation to 4,575. In higher education, they rose 69% to 3,137. The think tank released the findings ahead of a publication of its year-long task force study into the future of public services, with a final report launching this week, saying that politicians urgently need to embrace reform to rebuild trust. Maureen, how significant are these differences between England and Scottish satisfaction rates with these public institutions, and what do you think leads that change?
I think what leads that change is the onslaught that we see from reform and some of the mainstream media against government in general, and breeding and fueling dissatisfaction among the population if reform would make any difference other than line their own pockets and feather their own nests of themselves and their friends. But I do blame, as I say, reform and right wing people for some of this. It's good to see that there's been very little change otherwise in people's perceptions in Scotland, with the health service, despite its great difficulties, coming out well, and also local health services, which may mean that we're at last seeing the shift to primary care in the health service, and more people making use of primary care rather than waiting and ending up in A&E. So it's not all doom and gloom in Scotland, and there's some really good chinks of light in that survey.
Thank you, Maureen. For our last story, we've got democracy, free media, and the influence of billionaires. Reports that Elon Musk might give $100 million to reform UK appear to be false, but they have raised serious questions about the laws governing donations to political parties. A report in the Sunday Times yesterday said leading businessmen and Conservative Party officials believe there's credible prospect that Musk is preparing to give £100 million, 78 $100 million, sorry, 78 million pounds to Farage as an FU Starmer payment, with a view to transforming British politics, was the quote in the Sunday Times. Nigel Farage has denied any knowledge of such an offer, but said that Musk was very supportive of Reform UK. Peter Geoghegan, the former editor-in-chief of Open Democracy and author of a book on the malign influence of money in politics, says this story illustrates why UK's laws on political donations need to be tightened. On his Democracy for Sale Substack, Peter Geoghegan said the craziest thing about the story is that it is all perfectly legal. Musk is a South African-born billionaire who lives in the US. Our election laws are explicitly supposed to prevent foreign donations like this, but anyone from anywhere can get around the rules if they donate for a UK-registered company. The question of Musk's donation to Reform may be at the extreme end of money-buying political influence, but has highlighted a problem that has existed in the UK for years, and once again raises the issue of the undue influence of a small number of wealthy individuals who control media in the UK. Maureen, passing over to you. What makes legislation like this difficult? Why don't we see more legislation around individual investment into politics, since this is a topic that comes up pretty often and seems to have general public support?
So this all makes sense now as to why Reform isn't a political party in the sense that you and I would expect it to be an organisation built on members and their membership subscription, and individual donations. Reform, although Nigel Farage has said it's going to make it into a normal, if you like, political party, is a company, and that's how they have been getting round the rules, and that's probably how they have managed to spend money and gain support so quickly. But because my understanding was that foreign donations were totally and utterly against the rules for political parties. But this is obviously how Farage has been getting round the rules. So if Musk were to give a donation, as long as it's a political party, then as long as it's a private company or a company, private company, um, then then that might be how they're getting round the rules at the moment.
Yeah, sorry, just to double check. I'm just making sure that we've got this right. Is it Elon Musk can make these donations because Reform UK is a private company, or Elon Musk is using a private? Yeah, I believe Elon Musk is able to use local UK companies to donate instead to parties here. So it's not because UK Reform UK identifies as a party or a non-party. It's just that foreign investors can essentially funnel their money through UK businesses to make donations that they otherwise wouldn't be able to. I believe that's what's happening here. Just as a small correction, and I'll give you just a
Well,
small moment to sort of comment on that with that little
no,
correction.
I absolutely stand corrected. But as long as people know where the money's coming from, and it's
Hmm.
coming from Elon Musk, and the very Trump right wing from the US, then I think that needs to be stressed, because I am sure I'm not alone in finding that frightening.
Hmm. Yeah, and I suppose it just shows how complicated some of this legislation can be, since we have very complicated economic systems that can be filled with different rules and ways to engage with them. But thank you very much for that, Maureen. And with that, we will be wrapping up. Before I go, I just want to remind you that at Broadcasting Scotland, we depend on the generosity of our supporters. To everyone who has donated and to everyone who has signed up to make a monthly regular donation, thank you very much. We set our current fundraising targets in April, hoping to reach £36,000 by the end of the year. It is the beginning of December, and we have only raised £18,000, just half of our target. However, to pay our bills and survive, we need to raise at least £12,000 urgently. We face costs of over £4,000 every month, but only receive donations of around 2,500. We need more regular subscribers, but we also need to clear our debts alongside that. We are at crisis point and really need to increase our donations to be able to pay our bills and survive. Our programs will always be free to view. However, if you can afford £5 a month, please consider becoming a Broadcasting Scotland supporter, and please donate whatever you can. Thanks again to former SNP MSP Maureen Watt. I've really enjoyed your insight, and I'm sure our listeners have as well. Thank you very much for that. And
You're
goodbye.
welcome. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you for watching.